We have breaking news you need to know immediately. It looks like this conflict in Europe is getting worse, and it's getting worse quickly. We have all of the latest developments for you, as well as Tesla. Tesla's stock was actually green today. Did pretty good compared to the broader markets, which the Nasdaq ended down about 0.35%. As you know, Tesla has earnings tomorrow. What do you need to know? What are my expectations, and what do I expect to happen with Tesla stock? There's one thing and one thing only that is important for you to know as a Tesla stock investor. I'm going to give you guys my price levels in which I think Tesla stock could reach. Let me tell you right now, I'm bullish. So this is a bullish leaning video for Tesla. There's obviously risks out there with Tesla earnings. We'll talk about them in this video. But based on what we're seeing right now, based on all of the logical conclusions we can make, if you're a Tesla bull, you're probably going to be excited after this video. And I hope you are, because you deserve it. Let's go ahead and get into all of this information. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time to the channel, if you are living under a rock or the YouTube algorithm has not blessed you with coming across this channel yet, it's your lucky day. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of this information each and every single day. If you guys want to take it a step further, come trade Tesla earnings with us in the trading community. Come hedge out your portfolios. Come make some other earnings trades, sell some premium, do some spreads, all of it. Link down below in the description of this video. Let's go ahead and get into the breaking news that you need to know developing overseas tonight. Just as a quick recap for any of you guys that don't know, this could be a 20, 30, 40% pullback if the worst possible scenario does arrive. That would be a WW3 event. That would be about 20 to 30% of the world's oil supply getting cut off. That would most certainly send us into a deep recession. Some people would argue a depression. If gas was $10, $15, $20, $30 a gallon, it would not be pretty, and that's why we have kept you up to date with this developing story. As I reported in the last video, Israel did send an airstrike to a hospital in Gaza. This did eliminate about 500 people. This would be the deadliest single bomb since 2008, and there is now a lot of backlash on this. The president of Palestine has canceled his meeting tomorrow with U.S. President Biden following the explosion at that hospital. The Israeli National Security Headquarters has raised its threat level in Turkey to its highest level, while also stating that Israeli nationals in the country should begin to immediately leave. Turkey is indeed a member of NATO, so this situation is getting a little strange at this point. And we are getting this video that looks like a rocket was fired, intercepted in the air, kind of misfired, debris fell onto the hospital, caused that explosion and subsequent fire. So maybe after all, it is not an Israeli airstrike, but that's still the message that is being perceived to other world nations. Lebanon's Hezbollah announced that Wednesday is a day of unprecedented anger towards Israel and Biden's visit to Israel. I'm not sure the significance of this, but this airstrike or misfired missile, who knows what it was, it did just happen a couple of hours ago, so we still don't have everyone's comment on the situation. But it does look like the White House has discussed a potential U.S. military response if Hezbollah attacks Israel. Since the start of this conflict on October 7th, tensions between Israel and Hezbollah have been increasing with daily skirmishes between the parties along the Israel-Lebanon border. Several soldiers on each side have been eliminated. But so far, this is not escalating into another front in this conflict, and that's the last thing you want as a citizen, as a member of this planet, is the US involved in another conflict that does open the door for a much wider conflict. So hopefully this new threat, if you will, from the US keeps Hezbollah at bay and also keeps Iran at bay. That's the best possible outcome. This could either be, putting out the fire to some extent, the risk that this does spread, or it could be seen as a bluff from Hezbollah or Iran, and that could turn into a disaster, and it could turn into a disaster quickly. That's why we need to see how this visit goes with Biden and Israel. I doubt there's going to be any action taken from an Iran, a Syria, Iraq, Hezbollah, or anyone else when Biden is actually there. He will be there technically on Wednesday, so overnight tonight he'll be going there. Tomorrow morning we'll probably get some statements coming out. We'll probably get a little bit of news on this. But once he leaves, that's when you really need to be watching the situation a little more closely. Because again, this could cause markets to fall easily 20, 30, 40%, just depending on the severity of what happens in this conflict. And some strange news: the U.S. military open to drafting contingency plans with Japan and South Korea. I'm a little confused on this news, exactly what they mean here, but it doesn't sound good. That I do know for sure. Now let's discuss something a little happier, something that can make you a little happier than this depressing situation, and that is potentially Tesla earnings, what I expect, as well as the option activity, the technicals, and everything else. First things first, as I have said many times, the EPS doesn't matter, the free cash flow doesn't matter, the margin does not matter, none of that matters in terms of actually moving Tesla stock. But for some of you guys that are going to say, how does it not matter? Because it's simple. Markets are forward-looking. As long as you get good forward-looking commentary, that's all the markets care about. The markets care more about what's going to happen in the next 3 months compared to the previous 3 months. Plus, expectations are already very low for Tesla earnings. This could mean a much larger upside beat than maybe a lot of people are expecting. Now, even consider Tesla stock was in the green today by 0.37% as the Nasdaq closed down almost a similar amount. That's very strong. Now, I should say, if you get a huge miss on free cash flow, a huge downside move in margins, a huge miss on revenue, just a huge miss overall, the markets are going to pay attention to that. The markets are not going to like that. Same thing to the upside. If you get a big beat on revenue, big upside surprise in margins, big beat on EPS, the markets are going to like that. But what is really going to move Tesla stock 10, 15, 20% following earnings is all about the forward-looking guidance and commentary, which that probably comes on the earnings call at 5:30. For Tesla's actual expected numbers here, we're expecting about 73 cents for EPS and $24.38 billion of revenue. Over the trailing 4 quarters, Tesla has beat their EPS estimates by an average of 8%. We are expecting to see a little bit more pressure on gross margins. Some expect gross margins, Zach's consensus estimate, is for an automotive sector of 26.4%. They say operating margin is also likely to have been impacted by continued investments in capacity expansion of not just vehicle factories, but also supercharging network service, international applications, and battery processes. We expect the metric to decline 170 basis points sequentially, so that is about 1.7%. Their estimate for services and the other unit is pegged at $2.35 billion, implying growth of 43% year over year and 9% quarter over quarter. We expect revenues from the energy generation storage segment at $1.57 billion, suggesting growth of 40.6% and 4% on a yearly and sequential basis. So in the grand scheme of things, we're really not expecting terrible numbers here, but they're definitely not better than last quarter's numbers. Some of your year-over-year numbers as well are not going to look too great, like your auto gross margins. That number is going to be down quite a bit. But again, remember, none of this actually matters if you're someone that is an investor in the stock. Yes, it matters. You want to see the business doing well. But what's going to move the share price of Tesla is that those forward-looking comments. There's really one thing in particular that is going to affect Tesla stock the most. And I'm sure you guess it, or can guess it. It's the Cybertruck. Whether or not we get specifics on the Cybertruck, it has the potential to drive the stock much higher or much lower. For an example, in my base case scenario, we probably get the delivery event announcement, when that is going to be, and then probably when the first deliveries are going to start. I imagine the delivery event's probably going to be the end of October, beginning of November. Tesla's probably going to say they're going to start deliveries by the beginning of December or late November. In that case, I think Tesla stock is up 5 to 10%, because it's one of those things where we've been waiting on the Cybertruck for so long, since 2019. We don't have it yet. You can't assign that much value to a product that does not exist, that is unproven. There's a lot of skeptics even on the Cybertruck, which doesn't really sound appropriate given the amount of pre-orders we have for the Cybertruck being over 2 million. We'll see whether we get an update from that or not. I don't think it matters all too much. 2 million's already a big number. Whether it's 2.2 million or 1.9 million, I don't think that really matters in the grand scope of things. But if we do get a production target for 2024, that is your best possible outcome, and that probably sends the stock up 20% or so coming on Thursday, as long as it's a number Wall Street likes. If we get a number like 200,000 vehicles for next year, Wall Street is really going to like that number. If it's somewhere around 25 to 50,000, Wall Street might not like that number as much. So we just have to see. I think there's a lot of variables here. Who knows what Elon is going to say on the earnings call? Elon could bomb the earnings call again like he did last quarter. And that's always a risk. That was the number one risk that I said heading into Tesla earnings last quarter, is that Elon comes out and says they don't know when they're going to stop cutting prices, when margins are going to fall. On that note, if Elon does say something to the contrary of what he said last earnings and says the price cuts, they're probably over with, or a definitive, they're done, that would be very good news for Tesla stock as well, because then you can factor that in. Then you don't have to discount price cuts. You could say, hey, price cuts are done, and stick with your current model. Every time Tesla cuts prices, investors have to go back and redo their models and try to figure out what the valuation now is for Tesla on multiple different metrics. As you guys know, there's a lot of different ways you could value a stock, but that's not exactly great when they're cutting prices. But I really see that as the cherry on top. The sundae is the Cybertruck. And I do think it is even more encouraging that Tesla stock has been holding up very well. Tesla stock's been doing much better than even the broader markets. Currently, about 30% of stocks are above their 50-day moving average, whereas Tesla is above its 50-day moving average by about 2%. So you're already in the minority of stocks that are above their 50-day moving average, but stocks that are 2% or more above that 50-day moving average is probably around 10% or so. And what I also think is notable to point out between this earnings and last earnings is following earnings back for Q2, Tesla stock actually ran up from about $150 per share to $300. Okay, that was an increase of like 94%. Okay, now, not even in the same ballpark. Since last earnings, you're actually down about 15%. So, what happened last earnings? Tesla stock fell 10% the next day. You had seen most of the move heading into earnings. This time around, you really have not. And I think right now there's a lot less people excited about Tesla. Before, the hype was about Tesla going to $300 a share and then above $300 per share, in which I thought there was a pretty good chance of that actually happening. I think we would have seen a much larger rally in Tesla if it was not for Elon actually making those comments on the earnings call. As you guys can see pretty clearly, if we go back to earnings, Tesla stock was actually flat following earnings. This is a 30-minute chart. Tesla stock did nothing once the results were put out. Tesla stock was actually slightly green after earnings. And numbers did come in a little bit better than expectations, so that was good. But when you heard Elon say that they're possibly going to cut prices again if conditions warrant, you sold off in after hours, and then you really sold off the next day, again, about 10%, and you proceeded to sell off for another about 36 hours or so before you did finally catch a bounce, and it was very volatile after that point. So I think there is a lot of contention around Elon Musk and what he's going to say on the earnings call, but I do expect better things rather than not. And I do think after being down 15% from last quarter's earnings, even if you get some bad news, it's probably already baked into Tesla's share price. Something else that I have also highlighted over the past couple of weeks is this. Simple fact of the matter. This Israel conflict, it does complicate things, okay? It does have the potential to be a really bad negative catalyst for our markets. 20, 30, 40% downside is what I would expect if this thing does break out and become an even worse conflict. But minus that, imagine if that just goes back to business as usual, some kind of truce or peace agreement. Doesn't look likely, but if that does happen, investors are really paying attention to 2024 right now. If you are in a period of economic activity that is not exactly growing, even if we avoid a recession next year, it's not like we're going to be booming as far as GDP and economic data next year. Investors want to own growth stocks during that environment. It's hard to do so when rates are 5.5%. But what about rate cuts? We're expecting rates to fall in some degree or another in 2024. The trade so far has been short Tesla because they're very sensitive to economic activity and rates. What about when rates come down? That should be an upside tailwind for Tesla's business and ultimately for the stock price. So all of the things that people have been using to bet against Tesla for the last 18 months now are coming to an end. Tesla has done very well as far as its business, given where rates are. You can make an argument it's because they cut prices, whatever. I don't really care about that. Tesla has done well considering rates just went up the most in a single year in the history of the Federal Reserve. Rates are going to come down. Investors are going to position for that. Right now, nobody cares about 2023 anymore. It's all about 2024. So when you're looking ahead, Tesla is self-financed. They don't have to dilute shareholders, so you don't have that risk. Tesla is not going to go bankrupt. There's no risk of that anytime soon. Something catastrophic would have to happen for that to happen, so that's not even a concern. Tesla is actually trading cheaper than all of your other big tech names if you factor in growth, and you don't just look at PE, you look at PEG, PEG ratios, in which investors will start to look at more. When there's a low growth environment, investors want to own growth stocks because you're not always guaranteed just going to see stocks do well in a low growth environment. You really want to have some growth stocks in your portfolio because they should outgrow the broader markets, thus their share price should grow even more. And then finally, rates are going to come down in 2024. To what degree? To what kind of recession or slow growth environment we see? Who knows? The slower the growth, the more the rate cuts. It's as simple as that. So you know that's coming in 2024. If you're a hedge fund or an institutional investor or a retail investor, you want to position for that now and beat everyone to the punch before everyone else realizes exactly what I'm saying here in this video. So again, if we get something along the lines of earnings, the EPS, revenue, free cash flow, all of that, auto gross margins around expectations, nothing super spectacular, nothing is, having people very excited, nothing is really doom and gloom. It's just really along expectations. Maybe a little bit better than expectations, but not enough to get people excited. But in my base case, what I expect out of Tesla, if Elon announces the delivery event, probably towards the end of October, beginning of November. And then Elon also says, we plan to start deliveries, whatever date it is, maybe November 15th. We'll go with that. Well, that's my base case. That's what I'm expecting. And then I'm probably expecting Elon to say something along the same lines of, we don't expect to cut prices anymore, but if we need to, we will. I think that's pretty neutral. Who knows? Maybe I'm just seeing it as neutral. That seems pretty neutral. It's all about the Cybertruck. And I think in that event, you probably rise 5 to 10%. A 5% move from current prices, not including whatever move we make tomorrow, is about $269 or so. If you get a 10% move, that's around $281 to $282. If you get exactly what I just said, my base case, but you also get like 200 to 250,000 for a production estimate for Tesla and the Cybertruck next year, that's where Tesla stock likely rallies about 20% coming on Thursday. And that would be putting you at about $307 per share. And that's just my one-day expectation. That's just for Thursday, these numbers. You would likely see a continuation rally from that, as Tesla is by far the most under-owned large tech stock out there. And at that point, if you do get that kind of big upside move after earnings, you're going to be breaking out above your longer-term downtrending line, basically a trend line connecting the peaks. That's about 265. So even if you get something like 5% or so, that could trigger an even larger rally. And then I do think it is prudent to also acknowledge the short interest. Tesla stock alone is about 2.5% of the total stock market short interest, including 50 or so thousand shares or companies outstanding. Tesla alone is 2.5% of that. There is a lot of people that are not exactly bullish on Tesla. About $21.65 billion, a matter of fact, that are not exactly bullish on Tesla. As long as we get good earnings, we get a production estimate, we get the Cybertruck, then you are well on your way to getting into the mid threes. Question at that point is, do shorts start to cover in a big amount? I don't know. I couldn't tell you that. We're going to get a lot of insights on what Tesla expects for 2024, and also this new rule change that has recently come out. I've reported on this, but this article says new U.S. SEC rules to shine a light on short selling. Right now, if you look over here on Fintel, hedge funds and institutions do not have to report their short positions. They have to report their shares they own, their calls, and their puts. For whatever reason, they don't have to publish their short positions. But due to this rule that was approved with a 3 to 2 vote, so it was actually approved, we're going to get all of the information about all of these short positions. We're going to know, is Bill Gates really short in Tesla? Is some hedge fund like massively short in Tesla? Who is facilitating that short position? Who's on the back end of that? What kind of collateral is being used? We're going to know all of that information within the next 90 days or so. I doubt a lot of these hedge funds and institutions want everyone to know that they are massively short in Tesla. The individuals on CNBC, Dan Niles being one of them. We just looked at that video about a week ago, probably. He was hesitant to even say that he was short in Tesla. It's just not something you want to publicly advertise, but it's about to get advertised to everyone. That's not exactly the trade you would want to be in at that point. So there's a lot of reasons why I am bullish on Tesla. Now, in the bear case here, the real bear case that I see, I don't think it's margins that's going to cause a big drop. It's not EPS. It's none of that. The stock has already priced that in. You're down 15% still from last earnings. That's not a concern whatsoever to me. The biggest concern that could give you 5 to 10% downside, that 5% downside would put Tesla stock right at about 240. 10% downside would put Tesla stock right at about 228. This would be the same 10% downside we got in last earnings. The thing that causes that is just no word on the Cybertruck. Something along the same lines of, we might cut prices in the future. That gives you a 10% down move coming on Thursday. In my opinion, I think there's probably a 10% chance we don't get a delivery event date out of Elon and Tesla. So it's a very low chance I think that actually does happen. Now, we do have some data coming out of China here tonight at 10 o'clock. So about an hour after this video is posted, You're going to get the GDP growth rate year over year, industrial production year over year, retail sales year over year, fixed asset investment, GDP growth rate quarter over quarter, unemployment rate for September, industrial capacity utilization, all kinds of stuff. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, the UK inflation rate. And then tomorrow for the US at 8:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, you're going to get building permits. That's probably not going to cause the biggest move. But you are going to get the Fed Beige Book, as well as Fed Waller, Fed Williams, Fed Bowman, couple other Fed speakers, Fed Cook. But the Fed Beige Book will probably give us quite the move. It's basically a report of how all of the Fed districts are doing. How's the labor market doing in those districts? How's inflation doing? How's the job market doing? All kinds of stuff. And the markets do typically react to that. Lately, it's been pretty negative, so we'll see what happens. And then on Thursday, you're going to get Fed Jerome Powell that speaks at noon, and those are going to be the biggest catalysts. Obviously, overnight tonight, we might get announcements on this Biden trip to Israel, for sure by the day tomorrow. So that's probably what is going to drive the markets higher or lower. I do think it's also important for you guys to note, in the last video that was put out earlier today, the 10-year Treasury was up about 15 basis points, and the 30-year Treasury was up about 11 basis points. The 30-year Treasury now closed up only about 6 basis points, and the 10-year Treasury was up about 12 basis points. You actually seen a very much, risk on, like selling bonds in the beginning of the trading day. And then towards the end of the trading day, not so much. If you take a look at oil was up 0.50%, half of 1% in regular trading, up 0.15% in after hours. But gold is something I really want to highlight. Gold throughout the day was in the green. Gold ended up the day almost up 0.25%. So even though stocks were doing well at one point, bond yields were going higher, investors were selling the bonds, investors were also buying gold. So it wasn't the most risk-on market as you would think in the beginning of trading. And as you guys know, today was a little weird. The Nasdaq was down 1.5%. You soared back. You were up like half of 1%. And then the Nasdaq ended up closing down about 1/3%. It was a very volatile day today. And I do think the volatility is here to stay for quite a while. But you still did see some money moving in to risk-free assets or safety assets. Whenever there's a major problem, major fear out there, you want to watch gold, you want to watch bonds, even oil to a certain extent when it has to do with the Middle East. Oil showed a very much, hedging kind of risk-off move. Gold did as well. Bonds, not so much, but towards the end of the day, you did start to see that risk-off move as investors actually started buying the bonds towards the end of the day. And last but not least, the option activity today. You've seen about 508 orders totaling $571 million with a positive order value of 65% today. So you did see a lot of dollars head into Tesla options towards the end of the day today, and it was very bullish. 65% positive order value is really, really good. All things considered, even look at a Netflix, which reports earnings tomorrow alongside Tesla. Netflix was down almost 2% today. It's been getting beaten up recently. Tesla, quite the opposite. Tesla actually looks very, very bullish. So I would argue that Netflix might not have the greatest earnings and Tesla probably going to have some pretty good things to say. So that is going to do it for this video. Let me know down below in the comment section what you think about this information. Are you bullish on Tesla earnings? Are you bearish? Let me know. I would love to hear your opinions. If you guys would like to come share those opinions with me, come get access to all of the trades that I make in real time. Yes, we will be trading Tesla earnings. Well, come join us down below in the description of this video. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share this video with a friend as well if you have not done so already, and if you made it to the end of this video. My name is Michael Tyler. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.